If you go to your leadership and you're like, I got another offer, can you match it? And they're like, okay, you clearly went through all the interview process and you have a foot out the door. So we're not sure about your loyalty anymore. And so you would think that you can use that, but it's such a delicate situation.
We are so excited about this episode of Gentle Power because, as you've probably, for those who are watching, we are in a really, really beautiful space. This is not our living room.
Aspirational.
Aspirational new recording space. But can you, Garrison, maybe you could share how we ended up here?
Yeah, so we are here as guests of a startup called GoSpread.ai. And we met them through a friend. But the moment where we actually met in person was at your DJ booth.
So there was a really big tech party at the Tech Giga Party. Lots of founders, investors here in San Francisco.
Like a conference during the day, and then at night it turned into a party. And we've actually talked about this before because in a previous episode we talked about the first time they did this. And you played at the rooftop in the rain.
Right. Yeah.
And the second time...
We'll link to that episode.
Yeah. And the second time is when, you were indoors this time. And then the team from GoSpread.ai, they came to visit you at the DJ booth.
Yeah, lots of opportunities can even arise behind the DJ decks in the booth. And so we stayed in touch, and they have a studio space here in San Francisco. So we're in this very, very vibey spot. I feel like sitting here, I feel really inspired to just like record a dozen episodes today, but we only have about an hour of time with them. But they're very generous to bring us on and have us record an episode of Gentle Power here. So thank you, GoSpread.ai.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
I think what they do is they have like a podcast space and then they edit it for you. We will learn more. We'll add it in the show notes.
Yeah.
But speaking of DJing, we are riding a high from last night where you were in the DJ lineup for the Chainsmokers.
The Chainsmokers show in San Francisco. They threw a huge block party at a really big venue called the Midway.
Probably the biggest one in SF?
It's one of the bigger ones. I think probably the bigger ones are like Bill Graham or Cow Palace. Cow Palace or something. Yeah. They have some, those are the massive, almost stadium level or huge theater level venues, but Midway is very well known. They have huge artists like the Chainsmokers come play, but this was literally, what time is it now? It was less than 12 hours ago where I played an opening DJ set for the whole block party. It was just an hour before the Chainsmokers came on. The DJ set went really, really well.
Yes.
So many of our friends showed up. I was so touched just looking out at the crowd, and I see all these familiar faces right at the very front, and everyone's just dancing, and
one of my favorite parts, other than your set, which I think was one of the best ones you've done, but it was what do you call it? The screen behind you?
Oh, the visuals.
Visuals.
Midway has very cool giant LED screen behind as well as right in front of the DJ booth.
And not only were they so beautiful in an artistic way, but at half the time it was showing you. Maybe they had a camera facing you and you were projected. You were so big on the screen, and I think I was like overwhelmed with emotions.
I was looking over the videos that you took, and there was one when that happened for the first time. You turn it back on yourself, and you're like covering your mouth. You're like, "What's happening right now?"
Yeah, it was.
I actually saw that happen with the DJ right before, and I thought it was such a cool effect. But it was a good mental reminder for me as well to make sure that I'm not making any faces. I'm not picking my nose. You know.
And what was going through my mind was, because I only came for your set, and I'm like, oh, he probably doesn't know that he's projected on this huge screen. So I think at one point I was trying to get your attention, like, look behind you, you're on the screen.
So the set went very well. So many of our friends showed up. And once the Chainsmokers started, given that I had DJ'd, you and we got access to just being
on
in
their
the booth
with
the Chainsmokers. So we're just basically right behind them, very, very close as they were performing. And I don't know for those who are out, maybe those who are in San Francisco who have been to the Midway. I have never seen so many people at the Midway. I think apparently this was one of the biggest events in terms of attendees or ticket sales that the Midway has ever thrown in its history.
Wow, so around 10,000
They had sold almost 10,000 tickets.
Yeah.
But when you're at the booth and you actually see the perspective, I mean, all three directions, because
all the eye can see.
As far as the eye can see, just a sea of people.
Yeah.
And it was really funny. So when we were on the stage behind the Chainsmokers, and at one point, I kind of did this little mental exercise where I would sort of block out Alex and Drew, like the Chainsmokers, from my mind, and I would look at it and I was kind of pretending or almost like trying to imagine that it was my crowd. And I'm just like mentally manifesting this, but those are really cool moments. I would just look at it, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is
it came for me. And then I reminded you that many of them were at your set.
Yeah. I didn't even, that didn't occur to me until you had said it. I was like, oh yeah, I played just like an hour and 2 hours before this. So
yeah, that was unreal.
Probably one of the biggest and coolest sets that I've done as part of my DJ journey. But, and actually, so the way that I got this gig, I think we had covered it in a previous episode. But we realized as we were talking through this, there are a lot of parallels to negotiations.
Yes.
So for a bit more context, I was asked to DJ this Chainsmokers show, but I was also asked...
I think you weren't asked yet.
Oh, I wasn't asked yet. Yeah, it was a possibility.
It was a possibility. So it's the long weekend in SF, and on Sunday... Yesterday was the Chainsmokers, and today was another artist that you really like. I don't think I'd heard of him, but if you're in the music scene...
Yeah, his name's Levi. He's very big in the Afro House world. I see his content all the time. He's very good at making a lot of his content go viral. And so I was asked to DJ an opening set for Levi for his show, also at the Midway. That's happening today. But then, so that was actually offered to me, and all I had to say was, yes or no, or I can do it.
Yeah.
But then the conversation had started for this Chainsmoker one, but it wasn't locked in yet. And just for a bit more context, you typically don't want to do 2 back-to-back shows on a single weekend, just because a big part of you DJing is for you to also bring your community. And if you're doing back-to-back shows, it might be hard to invite a lot of people and bring people to both shows. So you typically want to avoid that. You want to deconflict and also respect the venue and the promoters who are inviting you to do this. And so
it's the promoters and the venue who cares about that.
Yeah, they care about it. And also you just want to make sure that
you also don't want to expand your social capital as a DJ where you're like, come to every single thing that I'm doing
this weekend. Right. Yeah, it's hard to just keep up that consistency. So the show for Levi was locked in. I was offered the opportunity, and it was basically saying yes or no. But then the Chainsmokers one, the conversation had just started. There was some back channeling. It was very in a gray area if it was actually going to happen or not. And I remember when I was talking to you, I said I was offered these 2 opportunities. Here's where it's at. I'm really actually just leaning towards the Levi show because I already have it. And, I really like him as well. And I just want to go with that.
Yeah.
And you really pressed me and said...
Well, I'm a maximizer. You're a satisfizer. You're right. Like, I already have Levi in hand. I just need to say yes. And maybe I could try to get the Chainsmokers, but it's not a sure thing. And... I was like, you have to try for the Chainsmokers.
Well, you had told me, you said, imagine if both of them were 100% yes. Which one would you want to go for? And I realized, I was like, probably the Chainsmokers show. It just feels like I knew both are actually going to be very big events, but I've just listened to the Chainsmokers since, for over 10 years, and they're just this household name, and that would have been very special. So I actually, what I ended up doing, I told the promoter and the event production group that invited me for Levi that I would love to do this, but I want to give you just a heads up that I was invited to also do the Chainsmoker one. That's TBD. But if you're okay with me doing back-to-back shows, I'd be happy to do it, but I completely understand given that these are happening like just one day apart. So I just wanted to be fully transparent with them, just make sure that they understand what's going on my end. But so that actually just didn't end up working out. He found other DJs with Levi, and then the Chainsmokers thing did happen. And it was the right call because it was just one of the most magical, just one of the coolest events, and seeing all of our friends there. And we're still, like as Gerta said, we're still riding the high from it.
I want to squeeze in the fact that as we were roaming around all the like special access areas, we also came across a rooftop that you can see, from which you can see the entire Midway. That was cool. But there was the robot DJ was there. We've talked about the robot DJ. I would love for us to, if we can manage it, kind of put in some clips from yesterday in this podcast, or you can just check out our Instagrams and we'll have
that robot DJ is really nipping at my heels, making sure that it's showing up at all the venues. So I realized that there's a parallel to a negotiation situation in my career as well that this Chainsmokers Levi gig locking down thing was related to. So in my before we started EuroNegotiations.com, when I was applying to jobs in my last career previous life, I'm like, what was that phase of my life again? So when I was applying to jobs, I was applying to multiple companies, and I had actually gotten an offer from a really, really awesome company I could see myself accepting an offer at. I would have been very excited to work there. Amongst one of my top choices, when I got the offer, man, the parallels to this is actually, they're so similar. When I got that offer, I had just started the interview process with another company that was really, really cool. Also, one of my top choices, and very similar conversation. I was very inclined.
But potentially higher pay, which it ended up being like much higher pay.
Yeah.
And a little splashier. So both were great options, but the one you had already in your pocket was very exciting and all that, but kind of a bit of a safer bet. And then the other one was more exciting, splashier, much higher pay, but you would still have to go through a take-home exam that would take hours, if not days. And so,
And I remember I was so inclined to just go with the safer one, and I guess also the satisfizer in me, and you're the maximizer. And just for clarity, a satisfizer being someone who doesn't need to explore and figure out every single option and do the full pros and cons and choosing the absolute optimal. If they choose something that they like, that's good for them, and they go with that, and it kind of doesn't matter. But then
is your wife, I don't know if this makes you feel great.
Yes, okay, we can. That's for another podcast episode. Actually, I have really good points about that. But for a maximizer,
at least you will not still be looking.
Right, exactly. I'm very, very happy with the situation and the co-founder situation and everything. But for a maximizer, someone who does all the analysis, they make sure that they spend all the time to figure out exactly what is the best optimal decision and going.
And then I found him, and
but so in this case, when I was applying to those jobs, I was very inclined to just go with the one that I had already gotten the offer from. I'm like, I'll be very happy here. But you really encouraged me. I think also the thing that was stopping me was the take-home assignment. It was due the next day, and I had started working on it, but I was basically gonna have to pull an all-nighter because
it was very long.
It was really long, and I really wanted it to be good. And you encouraged me.
I stayed up with you just to
you did.
Be there emotionally.
And so you really pushed me to do this take-home assignment, go through that interview process, because I think at the time too, you said, imagine if you got both offers, which one would you go with? And it's the one that I hadn't gotten the offer from yet. And so I did the take-home.
I want to add that also for negotiation purposes, you want to have two offers in parallel. So I was also thinking about that.
Yeah, which really did help.
It helped
a lot, And so I pushed myself to do the take-home, finished the interview loop. I did get the offer, and I ended up accepting that offer.
Taking the better one.
Taking the one that it turned out I was more excited about. So that one was basically the Chainsmokers offer, and then this other one, this Levi. Not to say that who's better, Chainsmokers or Levi.
Chainsmokers, Levi, I'm sure he's great, but Chainsmokers is a household name, like you said.
Yeah. So to bring it back to negotiations, you. Actually, maybe you can speak to that.
I think the takeaways here in terms of negotiations is that you approach it in a very collaborative way, one. So you went to the Levi team and you said, hey, I have this other option, and just so you know. So some transparency, you don't want to show all your cards, but some transparency is appreciated, and you think of it very collaboratively with the other party. And also, I think the biggest takeaway is just go after your dreams. We have so many clients who are like, I'm happy with this offer. I've been looking for a while. I'm just going to say yes. And I'm like, well, why don't we try to get a bit more? You never know what happens. We have helped clients get, our best performing client, $550K more on top of their initial offer. And the best performing client in terms of percentage, 42% more on top of their initial offer. And so who knows what is possible? Right. Why not go after your dreams? I think a lot of people think there's trade-offs. Sometimes there are no trade-offs. Sometimes the only trade-off is the courage to ask and the courage to pursue it. And so I think that's my favorite takeaway from all of these examples.
Yeah.
And all you had to do is tell the Chainsmokers team, whoever was organizing it, like, hey, I want to put my name in, or something like that.
Right.
And they were like, yeah, sure. So because they know you're so talented and you bring a crowd and all that. And similarly for the other company, you continue to pursue it, and it worked out.
Yeah. So we've had quite a weekend so far.
Yeah. Cool. So speaking of negotiations, we can go into the actual negotiation topic for today, which is promotions. We have a lot of people who reach out to us to help them with promotions and raises, which I think of them as two different things very quickly. So I think of a promotion as typically a title or level bump up, and a raise is actually like a money bump up. So you could get one versus the other. So you can get a raise, but not a title bump, and then you can get a promotion, more responsibility, better title, but not a financial bump up. So
which doesn't feel very ideal. I'm reminded of those memes on Instagram that says, hey, would you like to do more work, but we won't give you more money?
Yeah. So exactly. I mean, that happens all the time. I know people personally who have been given more responsibility. The excuse the company uses is you need to prove yourself in this role, and then promotion will come like in the next cycle or whatever.
Yeah, or they could frame it as, try to put a positive spin on it. Hey, this is a step up opportunity for you. It'll really demonstrate that you can take on more. And it's almost seeding potential promises of treasures later down the road. But without you getting anything in writing, you can just assume that it's not locked in.
Yeah, it's not locked in. But you can also not get them to put it in writing, like your own manager. What are they going to say? I promise, like even in an email, like I promise to promote you or give you more money in 6 to 12 months. And then later they can simply say, oh, things have changed for whatever reason, like leadership, or we have a limited number of promotions or raises and things like that. So I think people over-index on having things in writing. In an offer letter, like an actual, like your salary and your compensation, those, yes, I mean, there's like kind of legally binding, they can fire you anytime. So it's tricky. And maybe we can talk about this another time, all the nuances of like
getting things in writing. That's true.
Yeah. If anything, I guess if I had to summarize that, it's more sort of the social contract that like if you put it in writing, it will be harder for you to maneuver out of it, rather than I can actually hold you to it. You actually cannot hold people to things even if they put it in writing. They can always find excuses like, oh, things have changed, our priorities have changed as a team, as a company. So I want people to be judicious about that. And the other reason is like sometimes you're losing social capital by asking someone to put things in writing. And so don't waste that when ultimately you don't gain much anyway.
Nice. I like how we have a little micro episode of another topic within this episode.
Just a teaser.
I definitely think that's worth having a full-fleshed episode on, just because there are a lot of nuances. But back to promotions. So there is a big difference between negotiating new offers and negotiating promotions, right? Yeah. So do we want to go into some of what those differences are?
Yeah. And so I think let's maybe call it raises, because I think since we're in the negotiation business, mostly people think about money. We do help people negotiate anything and everything, even beyond job offers, beyond your career, such as B2B contracts, like business contracts and things like that. But in general, people are here, or people work with us because of the financial aspect. And so we're going to call it raises going forward. But I do want to say up front, just giving away the spoiler, that if you are seeking more money, the best way to do that is to get another job, actually go to another company, rather than get a raise internally, raise or promotion internally. And there's a few reasons why that is. So should we get to it?
Yeah, so the first reason is the company actually already knows how much you're being paid. So when you are negotiating, one of the best leverages, you don't want to share your own number or range. That's you protecting your own
with
leverage.
A new company.
With a new company when you're applying to new jobs. But in a raise situation, they already know what that card looks like, right? So you're already at a bit of a disadvantage. But if you're applying to new jobs, if you're protecting that information, then it's harder for a company to know how much more they should give you. And sometimes they may be giving you a lot more. So that's why there's a lot more potential for a bigger comp increases when you're changing jobs.
Yeah. And to highlight how important it is, this aspect is the fact that a company knows how much you're making, the fact that you, like your own company and external companies, the fact that you should not and never share how much you're making or have made in the past. Here's an example why that is so important. In many states in the US, there's laws where companies are by law not allowed to ask you about your salary history. So people have advocated for you, legislations have passed to protect that leverage for you. This is how important it is. It's not just, oops, I shared how much I make. Oh, it's just like a random negotiation tactic. No, it's so critical for you to not share how much you're making with an external company or how much you made recently, because it anchors them, and they might have had much bigger budgets and now they'll just pay you similar or the same as what you're making now. And so that's why it's part of one of the main reasons why raises and promotions are not going to give you the best outcome, is because they already know how much you're making. They already know what you've been okay with for the last few months or years.
Yeah. And actually, there's a side note that I just remembered. So even though companies are supposed to put the pay range, sometimes they may not, even if they legally are supposed to. And maybe they forgot. And the reason why I thought of this, I recently had a call with a potential client, and she had shared with me the job description of a role that she was applying to, and it was for a very early stage startup. I think they only had 5 to 10 people, and she would be coming in as one of the first ops hires. And she shared with me the job description, and she said there wasn't a pay range. They just told it to me throughout the interview process. And she said, I thought they were supposed to put it. Isn't that the law in California? And like, maybe should I bring that up? And I said, sure, you can bring it up because legally they are supposed to, but then you would not want to do that. The best thing you can do from a negotiations perspective, even if you see that they did something that they weren't supposed to, just assume best intent. Maybe they're so early, they forgot to include it. Maybe it was a draft job description, and you just don't know what was happening on their end. And if you were to call it out, that could potentially make them defensive. It could just kind of tank the vibes, and you want to keep things in a very positive, collaborative way. So that was just one thing I remembered. If people do see things that are happening out there, whether something that a recruiter says or something they do or what an employer does, they don't put the pay range in, just assume best intents and just continue making sure that you engage in a very collaborative, positive way and continue the negotiations from there.
Yeah, I love that, because actually in some states, the law does exclude a certain companies if they're too small. I don't remember exactly where the cutoff is, but it could be at 5 people.
Right.
So like if you're so small, you actually don't need to put the range there.
Yeah, it could have been one of those
It could have been one of those, yes. And so to tie what you said back to what we were talking about, there is laws not only for them not asking, like companies cannot ask you about your salary history, and there's laws where they need to put their salary ranges on their job descriptions. And in either scenario, you want to assume best intent. And so if they ask you, you just say, I'm not sure if I'm supposed to share that, and move on.
So bringing it back to the raises again, we're just going multi-layer here. So another reason about how promotions differ from new job offer negotiations, it was around like the status quo. Can you go into that piece?
Yeah, there's a lot of, well, what I love about negotiations is that it incorporates a lot of psychology terms and behavioral sciences concepts. And one of them is the status quo bias. So we tend to prefer the status quo over a new option. I guess it's probably just human nature being more risk averse. And so a company knows that by you already being there, the chances of you leaving are much smaller as opposed to looking at attracting new talent. So new talent is already out there, they're floating around and they have other options, and most people interview in multiple places, as they should. And a company is not as incentivized to give you more money to make you stay because you're tied in through the status quo bias, as opposed to they are willing to pay more for a talent that's out there. They want to grab them away from the rest of the market. And another reason is that it's riskier for a company to hire someone new as opposed to keep the people that are already internal. And you would think that, just by hearing that, you would think that, why aren't they giving me more money? They already know how I perform internally. But the logic is that because it's so risky to hire someone new, they are willing to put in more money to get someone who is a more of a sure bet.
That's a very interesting concept that it's not very obvious. And for those who are actually in the role, they feel that they have put in the work to deserve more compensation. But from a first principles perspective, a company will pay more for a stronger candidate because they're taking a bet on someone that they don't know as well. So to tie this all back together, you will get the highest potential for comp increases when applying to new jobs versus for raises at your current employer.
But not only, and some people may hear this as, I think the natural follow-up question is, and we get this a lot, is like, I can get another offer and can I use that as leverage within my company? That is extremely tricky, because even though our advice and a lot of like career consultants' advice is to always have a pulse on the market, but it might come across as a little tricky if you go to your leadership and you're like, I got another offer, can you match it? And they're like, okay, you clearly went through all the interview process and you have a foot out the door, so we're not sure about your loyalty anymore. And so you would think that you can use that, but it's such a delicate situation. So be very careful how you handle that. We help people navigate that situation, but it's tricky. Even as we're happy to handhold you through that, it is tricky nonetheless. And you never know how it will land. We can help you have it land as softly as possible, but yeah.
So this might be good to go over what you want to keep in mind if you are negotiating for a promotion. So I think the first thing that you said is, it's because it's a trickier conversation to navigate, you have to be extremely tactful in how you communicate it, because you don't want to make the company, your employer, your manager feel like you're threatening them with leaving, or you're threatening them with better compensation. So it's a much more delicate back and forth that you need to have with the company.
Yeah, absolutely. I also wanted to add a couple more things to keep in mind. One is that a promotion/raise conversation and negotiation, it doesn't really have a time bound. Like sometimes it can take years for you to work on it and get that and see that through. And yeah, again, that's not ideal. Like you could put in a year's worth of work just on the promotion, raise conversation, and maybe still not see it, versus with a job offer, you like, obviously it's like much more time bound. And then the other thing to keep in mind, people might have, this might resonate because we've seen this in our own careers. There's a ceiling to how much you can get within a company. And it ties back to all the status quo bias, the anchoring and all that. So promotions and raises are usually maybe 3 to 10% over your current salary, and usually off of base. We have seen some more exciting numbers, but the sky is the limit with a new job offer. Yeah. And you might not even get a 3 to 10%. And
yeah, so a lot of companies, for them, when they're thinking about giving out raises versus when they're thinking about giving out new offers, they are operating within tighter constraints for raises, maybe through their processes, but also probably even just their own bias too. Because if the norm is you get 3 to 10% increase, when you ask for an extra 50% on top of your offer, it feels and sounds almost ridiculous, right? So that's another reason why that for promotions, raises, it can be a bit tougher. So you had mentioned then you want to be extra tactful and extra careful in how you communicate. And for raises, you're operating on a much longer timeline. So for new job offers, the negotiations may take place over several weeks, if not sometimes even just a couple of days. But for raises, if you want to raise at your current employer, you need to start thinking about this in terms of months and possibly even years if you plan to stay there for a while. And so you don't want to bring up a raise and try to get it within the next couple weeks, or
it's just not gonna fly.
Yeah, and if your company has a regular performance review cycle and a regular cycle on when there are raises, if you want to get a bigger raise or a bigger bump, you need to start having this conversation with your employer months in advance. At least start seeding the idea that this is top of mind for you as you approach performance review season. But asking for that much higher bump at the time that they give you the raise, your employer likely has already made all the decisions on how much more people are going to get, and it was very tied to their budget. And so your chances of getting a bump there, if that's when you're starting the conversation, is much less likely to go the way that you want.
Yeah.
And the final thing, and this is actually a similarity between new offers and raises, but you always want to have additional options.
I thought you were going to tie it to the Chainsmokers.
I think we fully covered all aspects of the Chainsmokers show. But you want to have other options. Of course, the best leverage is having other offers. And if you do, then if we were to work together, for those who are listening, then we'd help you. How do you tactfully communicate that? But one thing that we always recommend people do all the time is you very likely, even if you're at a current job, you very likely get cold DMs from recruiters on LinkedIn. And we encourage, if any of those look remotely interesting, just to take that...
Entertain it.
Just to take that first initial call with the recruiter for a few reasons. One is you always want to be evaluating your market value. You want to understand, is the market changing and accelerating beyond what I'm being currently paid? And just have a good understanding of what your skills, what your experience level companies are willing to pay for. The other thing too is you just don't know if this opportunity actually ends up becoming your next dream role, right? Even if you're happy at your current job, if it feels like you can envision yourself possibly even working there, why not take the call? It doesn't take that much of your time. And who knows, if you realize you've really fallen in love with it, you go through the interview loop, and this could actually be the next big step in your career.
That's what happened with you, right? Previous company we mentioned.
Exactly.
You were already happy, and then you fell in love with the second one.
Just to recap, the differences.
We don't recommend going the raise route if you're optimizing for money.
Yeah.
And we actually have started, we don't take clients anymore as much who need help with raises. We still might, depending on our pricing structure.
Right.
But it doesn't, we prefer to get clients who are for new jobs.
Yeah. Let's see if we covered everything.
I think we covered everything. Yeah. We can wrap this up.
For all of those, because we actually do get a lot of DMs on Instagram, a lot of people booking calls with me, and the free calls that we do, asking about promotions and raises. So hopefully this at least covered a bit more of what that world and that process looks like. And even if you do have questions around promotions and raises, we primarily focus on the new job offers, but we're happy to chat through that. And we're also always evaluating our service and how we work with people. And there may be a way for us to kind of figure out how we can support you in that as well.
It might be more expensive, basically.
Yeah, look at that, negotiations. Yeah, this is great. We're going to wrap here, and we will see everybody on the next episode of Gentle Power. Thank you again, GoSpread.ai.
GoSpread.ai. Thank you.
All right.